Welcome in. It is the Footballguys DFS Show, and we are back. It's myself, Jeff Bell, Devin Knotts, and Phil Alexander, and we're going to dive into the Week 3 slate here. We have DraftKings. We're going to look at our cash game plays, our GPP plays, our games of the week, our stacks, and run through all of that. And I wanted to start this out. I did want to ask you guys a question because last week we saw Jonathan Taylor and the Colts have a great game going up against a very difficult defense. And I was wondering kind of thoughts about, especially in tournaments, potentially something that looks like a very bad play on paper because of the matchup that turns out to be maybe the best play on the slate. But Phil, do you look at things like that to kind of be contrarian in those types of situations, or are you just trying to target the very best matchups that you can find?
In tournaments, it all depends on their percent rostered relative to their upside, right? Sometimes those do end up the ideal situations, like we saw last week, where Taylor and Daniel Jones also really were able to take over and kind of impose their will. And I guess that kind of ties into it being one of those things about how it's early in the season and we kind of don't know what we don't know yet. It's very possible that what we're seeing from Daniel Jones, I think what we're seeing from Jonathan Taylor could definitely continue. But what we're seeing from Daniel Jones, I think it could continue too, because here he is with the best weapons he's ever had, with an offensive line that could keep him upright, with a play caller who's proven that he could script good enough plays for quarterbacks like Daniel Jones to succeed. So maybe we shouldn't be that surprised that they were able to do what they did against the Broncos. And yeah, that's how tournament winning scores are sometimes won, because that does correlate to ownership.
Yeah, I think the Daniel Jones thing was more surprising than Taylor. That pass defense, I do the rushing and passing matchups for Footballguys, and going into the year, they were the number one pass defense that we had on the board, and they're still very good. I wonder if this team is a funnel defense where you might want to target running backs against them. Similar to Carolina, you don't want to target quarterbacks against them. That's really been true the last 2 years. Not that their quarterbacks are great, but their run defense historically has been so bad that it brings down the overall outlook and their performance of the quarterbacks, simply because, one, they have Bryce Young at quarterback, so they don't need to throw that much, and two, if you can run the ball, that's much less of a turnover risk than throwing. So if you're having success gaining 4 or 5 yards a carry, why would you need to run? Why would you need to throw it?
Yeah, I'm seeing a lot of comparisons to the Saints from last year to this Colts team because of the way the Saints started so hot. But if you look at that Saints team, it was all the vertical passing, and that didn't last. Whereas really Daniel Jones is being asked just not screw it up. And the Eagles have a pretty good game plan of their quarterback not screwing it up, and it led to a Super Bowl. So as long as Daniel Jones gets shoved into the end zone on the 1 yard line, we know how that works for Jalen Hurts. But let's dive into our games this week. And Devin, what games are you looking to target, maybe outside of and including the Bears and the Dallas game, after we saw both of those games go absolutely wild last week?
Yeah, I think that's the one everyone's going to be having their eye towards, as far as both defenses are pretty brutal, especially with Deron Bland still looking like he's going to miss. Jalen Johnson is out for the Bears. That's both teams' top corners. So I think both Caleb Williams and Dak are going to be extremely popular. Other games that I'm targeting or just looking at, I kind of like the New England-Pittsburgh game. I'm still trying to figure out, is this Pittsburgh defense any good? And against the run, they really haven't been. They've allowed over 100 yards to Breece Hall, and who was the running back that did it last week? Anyway, they've done it 2 straight weeks. So I think that there's some upside there as far as some back and forth. But it's kind of a weird week because we have a lot of backup quarterbacks, a lot of uncertain situations, and then some really bad offenses like Cleveland and Carolina and the Jets with Tyrod Taylor. So there's not like games that I'm targeting. It's more just individual players outside of Pittsburgh, New England, and the Chicago, Dallas. I want to target Minnesota, Cincinnati, but Minnesota's running the ball so heavily that the number of plays in those games is pretty low.
Yeah, that's an interesting one too, because I remember the last time those two teams played, and I don't think we had Joe Burrow, and I don't think we had Kirk Cousins in that game for that one either. And so the world is just a cruel world at some points. But Phil, are there any other games that you're targeting that this week?
Yeah, Vegas is not providing a whole lot of clarity on this front this week. I mean, it's Cowboys at Bears, and then every other game is in that 43 and a half, 44 and a half range, and there's not a whole lot of separation, like Devin said. I guess if we could look at one, Broncos at Chargers is a little bit above the rest at a 46 and a half point total. And we know that the Chargers now are a pass first team that looks pretty solid. And the Broncos are beatable on defense and can compete offensively. So there could be some scoring in that one. Maybe Eagles at Rams. At the very least, the Rams offense looks good. I think they could score on this Eagles defense and maybe finally force them to feature their wide receivers a bit. I think that, I'm not local to Philly, but I have to imagine that the sports talk radio there is all about how Kevin Patullo is not involving AJ Brown and Devontae Smith in the game plan. So maybe he's facing some pressure. And I do like Falcons at Panthers for some points. Might be some garbage time points, but some points nevertheless.
Yeah, the Falcons, it was a little bit surprising last week, the way that they just controlled against the Vikings, but also leaning on that defense. They've really invested heavily in the defense. It looked solid, but maybe JJ McCarthy just looked that bad. But before we dive into our cash game plays, please take a moment to like, subscribe, and just maybe add your comments to the slate in terms of our YouTube here. And we appreciate you all out there. Let's look at our cash game plays. And Devin, how did Cracky FanDuel do last week? Are you 2-2?
Not great. We are 1-1.
Was it the Justin Fields play?
No, I went heavy on Kyron Williams, and he was the cover boy. I knew he was going to be the guy who either made it or break it, and Blake Corum decided this would be the week that he would get playing time and score a touchdown, and they had a Puka Nacua 45-yard touchdown. Anyway, nobody cares about my fantasy lineups.
It's time to bounce back. That's all.
We're on to Cincinnati.
Which 4,000 quarterback are you going to play this week, given all the injuries that we have on the slate?
That's the question, right? I mean, if I'm playing one, this is so out of character. Like, I've hated this guy for... We had a staff member literally, I think, quit because of how much I hated this player. Marcus Mariota, $4,000. This was back in like 2017 or 18 when he was on the Titans. He's in the last two games he started, he's run for 45 yards average. So I think the floor is a little bit higher there. The matchup is pretty good against Las Vegas. So the Raiders are allowing I just had it up and I can't do anything right today, it seems. But, the Raiders are allowing 265 passing yards per game. Drake May threw for 287 and 1. I think I'm not going Carson Wentz just because I don't trust this offense at the moment. I mean, if you're not throwing more than 20 times per game, are they going to start just completely change the game plan now that Wentz is quarterback? Maybe, right? They're not going to be running those halfback tosses that JJ McCarthy runs like 7 times a game. But I don't know. I think the upside there is pretty limited. But honestly, if I can get up to Caleb Williams, I'm probably just doing that at 5,600. The price isn't overly prohibitive. He seems safer. Daniel Jones at 54 seems safer. But if you want to go down bottom of the barrel, just give me the upside of the rushing potential for Mariota.
Yeah, I think you can make the argument for both of them having weapons around them, and maybe if he defenses against them. Phil, are you going the same direction, or are you looking at anything else on the board?
Yeah, I think you got two choices. It's either because first of all, there's no Josh Allen, there's no Lamar Jackson, there's no Joe Burrow, unfortunately, probably for the rest of the season, or at least until week 16 or so. So there really is no heavy spending at quarterback this week. There's no need to go past Caleb Williams or Dak Prescott. And then obviously you got a bunch of guys in that 4 to 5K range. I'd agree with Devin that if I did spend down and I went the 4K route, Mariota would be the guy because of the rushing, because he hasn't washed out of the league the way Wentz has. And he is on more of an offense that's likely to do some passing in a decent matchup. Uh, I'm playing Dak Prescott at 5,900. I know Caleb Williams looks good, but for 300 more, we're looking for floors in cash games, and Caleb Williams still has a scary low floor. You kind of never know what to expect, even though the rushing has helped him a little bit this season. Um, I just think Dak has the safety. He's at least playing well. We know that for sure. He's looked good in his first two starts, even though the stats weren't there in week one. The game is going to be paced up. Both defenses are terrible and injured. Um, even with Jalen Johnson playing, the Bears are allowing the fourth highest EPA per pass attempt. I just think don't overthink it. Play Dak Prescott. He's cheap enough, and there's enough value elsewhere.
The Javonte Williams factor is the difference for me in the two. I think it's close. You could go either way, and it's in Chicago.
So here's what it boiled down to for me. I was seeing like a 2v2 where it would be Dak and like a 6,200 wide receiver, which we'll get to, but there's a couple guys that I like at that exact price. And then the trade off is going with Mariota and raising one of those receivers to like a Puka Nakua. But on my projections, that's actually given up a few points. So I stuck with Dak.
Yeah, I think Caleb does bring in a little bit more of the run game as well to raise that floor up just a little bit. But yeah, we haven't seen the passing ceiling. And if one of these guys is going to go for 450 yards, I feel like this week it's going to be Dak Prescott, not going against Dak Prescott. But let's dive into our running backs. And Devin, are you going to go? You're probably not going to go back to the Kyron Williams well, but where are you going to build your running backs this week?
No, this is the easiest play that we've had all year. Bijan Robinson, 7,900. He said, you look at the last two games against Carolina, like I talked about, they have the worst run defense in the league. Week 18 last year, he had 170 yards and 2 touchdowns. And week 6 of last year, 95 yards and 2 touchdowns. Every time he touches the ball, I mean, this year he just looks different from every other running back that's in the league. The burst that he has when he turns the corner, it's good luck. I think that the only other running back that you could consider this week at that top end would be Christian McCaffrey at 82. And I understand Jonathan Taylor is 7,200. He's probably going to get some attention, but I think for me this week, it's Robinson. He's gone over 100 yards in each of his first 2 games. It's clear that he is the focal point of this offense. Running behind arguably the best right guard in football in Chris Lindstrom. So I think that it's a pretty clear number one for me. Now the question is, where do we go from there? And I think the name that most people are going to gravitate towards, and I don't disagree with it. If we were talking GPPs, I probably would, is Jordan Mason at 5,400 with Aaron Jones out. I don't know. I think he's fine. I don't think he's anything special. But at the price, we know this is a team that wants to run the ball. We've seen Cincinnati over the last several years be hit or miss when it comes to defending the run. So I don't hate it. It's more of just like I don't want to be on an island against it. So I'm just going to take it because everyone else is, and I'll figure out the rest of the lineup elsewhere. So, I mean, that gets me 2. And then if I can fit a third, I mean, if I choose a third one, it's really sort of open this week. I mean, you can look at Javonte Williams. I'm probably not going that way just because I think he's too touchdown dependent. Yes, he looks good. I mean, he looks as good as he did his rookie year. He's had like 3.6 yards a carry over the last two years as a starter, but his rookie year, people forget how good he was. He was like 4.5 yards a carry, and he's back towards that number. So I think the reset to Dallas could have helped him, but too early, not willing to go there. I think if I was going to play a third running back, it would likely. This is gross. I'm going to come back, but I mean, I think the 6,300 price for Alvin Kamara is pretty cheap for the player that you get against Seattle.
Devin, I don't want to. And did you see Zach Charbonnet was on the injury report with a foot injury? If Zach Charbonnet scratches Kenneth Walker at 5,800, does that enter the conversation?
Yeah, 100%.
Okay.
I mean, he would be in the Jordan Mason, like that would make a clear 1, 2, 3 for me.
Okay. Phil, what have you got on your board?
Yeah, this section's going to go pretty quick because I've also got Jordan Mason and Bijan Robinson. I think it's pretty easy. Mason is kind of our first mega chalk play of the season. If Walker is getting the full workload in Seattle, if Charbonnet is out and he did not practice today, maybe that pushes down Mason's tournament ownership more than I thought it was kind of before we heard that news. But I thought Mason could be like 40% in tournaments, where I'd agree with Devin. I wouldn't go near him there, but just take the free square, so to speak, and try to beat your opponents at a different slot. It's not like he has a bad matchup against Cincinnati. Jacksonville looked fine with the run against them last week. Bijan's a great play for all the reasons that Devin mentioned. I mean, maybe there's like an inkling of concern about the floor that you don't have with Christian McCaffrey, just because Atlanta's been involving Algier a little bit more than they did at the end of last season, but it's not enough to concern me in this matchup because the Carolina thing is not just a 2-game sample, right? They were the worst rush defense in the entire league last season. And as far as rush yards over expected per play, they're the second worst this season. So we have a large enough sample to know that Bijan's a great play in this spot.
I mean,
what
I would say is that if you think Christian McCaffrey's close to Bijan this week, play them both, and you can easily do that if you went to Mariota or Carson Wentz. At the 4K range, you can like there's a lineup that I'm building on the side here that has Wentz, Mason, Robinson, McCaffrey, and Puka Nacua all in it pretty comfortably. I mean, you have to go with like a Rome Odunze and a Keenan Allen as your second and third receivers, but that's not like the end of the world. If McCaffrey and Robinson both get there, you're probably going to win in cash because the other running backs do take a little bit of a risk when it comes to your opponents. So I don't think it's a terrible play to play both this week.
Let's look at wide receivers. And Phil, how are you going to build a wide receiver lineup with the slate that we've got going on right now?
So yeah, if we're trusting Dak Prescott to have a good game, I don't see that happening without CeeDee Lamb coming along for the ride. Lamb's commanding 28% of the targets in Dallas, easily cruised past the 100-yard bonus in each of his games. I know that stacking adds a little bit of variance to cash lineups, but it also gives you a boost when you're right. And I don't see how we're wrong about the Cowboys this week. That feels pretty safe to me, even though they're correlated. And Devin mentioned Rome Odunze at 5,300. I think that's another one that people are going to be on. And of course, now I've got a cash lineup that's got a stack and a bring back. So we're kind of teetering on GPP territory, but it's still going to be high owned. And this is still the game that you want to attack on this slate. There's really, like we said, only one. But Odunze should be like 700 more than he is based on his target share is 29.4%. Everything that Ben Johnson talked about in the offseason about moving him around the formation is coming to fruition, and it looks like he's kind of plugged some of the leaks in his game that he showed as a rookie. Then I think I mentioned Garrett, or maybe I didn't mention him, but I mentioned the $6,200 wide receiver that I liked. That was Garrett Wilson. So I think it's kind of interesting, and I don't know if the field is really going to go this way as much, but to me, like when Justin Fields hit that downfield pass to Wilson in week 1, that was like a really pretty throw. I made the same sound as I do when I spill coffee all over my desk. It was like a complete like shock, and that's not the way it should be, right? When a quarterback completes a forward pass, but it's how it was. So Tyrod Taylor is not a world beater, but he can throw the football better than Justin Fields. He could throw the football better than Zach Wilson. I might even say that he could throw the football better than the Jets version of Aaron Rodgers from last year. So Wilson's target share is hovering around 40%. The Jets have no one else to throw to. Tampa Bay is dealing with injuries on both sides of the ball. They've traditionally been easier to pass on than run on, even though they're going to be short their starting defensive tackle this week. So there's Wilson, and then I think Smith and Jigba from Seattle is also viable again. I think this is the last time we'll see him below 7K, possibly for the rest of the season. He's come out of the gates hot with back-to-back 100-plus yard games, at least 21 DraftKings points in both. His target share is even higher than Wilson's, 41%, which is like staggering. And then they're playing New Orleans. The Saints play up in pace, or they have been so far.
Chris Olave, do the trio. Oh wait,
I'm not doing
it. You already went Wilson and Smith and Jigba. Go Olave.
I mean, look, Olave's getting targeted enough that it might not be a terrible idea.
Harrison Jr.
But yeah, I like Smith and Jigba. I think that the way that the Saints are playing are kind of forcing their opponents to run more plays. We saw it last week with the Niners. They ran like almost 70 plays, which is not usually in their wheelhouse.
Yes, CeeDee Lamb, 4 consecutive 100-yard games. Michael Irvin has the Dallas Cowboys record at 7, so this looks like a great opportunity for him to add 5. But Devin, are you got any other plays that you're looking at cash and wide receiver plays here?
Yeah, I mean, I'm debating at the top end, and that's where I'm struggling a little bit as far as like, what do I do? Do I go CeeDee Lamb if I can afford him? Do I go Jamar Chase? Puka Nakua's there. I think I like Chase the best. And the reason there, I like to target number 1 receivers when their quarterback is out, and at least they have a competent backup quarterback, because oftentimes you get a backup quarterback who doesn't progress through their reads. They're just like, oh, I have Jamar Chase. I'm going to throw the ball to Jamar Chase. And that's sort of what we saw last week, where he had, 15 targets, I think. 14 receptions for 165 and a touchdown. And like, I don't really respect Minnesota's defense in general. I know their run defense has been much worse than their pass defense through the first 2 weeks, but that was a lot of just Bijan Robinson skewing the stats there. So I kind of really like, I think I like Chase slightly more than Lamb. But it's pretty close. Now, the Garrett Wilson thing is interesting. I actually prefer Devontae Adams at 6,200 because he gets the number 2 corner from Philly. What was his name? The kid from USC that was in Tennessee forever. Anyway, it'll come to me, but I'll look it up as we talk about it. But, I mean, Adams has been involved. I mean, he had 9 targets last week. So I think he's a guy that gets in the end zone this week. And I just trust him a little bit more. I trust Matt Stafford a little bit more than I do Adoree Jackson, by the way. I trust him a little bit more than I do Tyrod Taylor when it comes to quarterback play.
Good stuff. We got tight ends. Let's round it out here. Let's round out these cash game lineups. And Devin, I'm going to hit right back to you with your tight ends plays this week.
I mean, tight end just seems like it's going to be gross all year. I don't know. I'm probably just going back to Tyler Warren at 4,400. I think the price is still good Didn't have like a tremendous game last week, but was good enough. He was limited in practice, but 4 for 79. Anytime you can get almost 20 yards per reception in a difficult matchup, he had against Denver last week. I think he's a guy that at least shows explosiveness that I think he should be in like the low 5K range rather than the 4,400 price tag.
Philly, do you think the same thing? I know that, Jake Ferguson's sitting there at 4,000 in that game that we've been talking about, or do you go up to Trey McBride? How do you approach these tight ends?
So just to quickly recap my lineup, this is where paying up to Dak Prescott does limit you a little bit, because if I'm playing Dak at 5,900 instead of Mariota at 4,000, right, and then I've got Mason and I've got Bijan and I've got Lamb, Adunze, a $6,200 wide receiver, whether it's Wilson or Adams, and then a flex in that same range, Wilson, Adams, and Jigba, they're all in that neighborhood. You're not left with much. So it's going to depend entirely on what we learn about Tucker Kraft's knee injury. So he tweaked his knee in practice today. It sounded bad at first. The best thing that the reporters were saying was that it didn't look season ending. And I almost had a coronary because I've got a lot of Tucker Kraft and all my season long stuff. But since then, there's been reports that he might be able to play on Sunday. If he can't, Luke Musgrave is a guy I've been a fan of for a long time. I think he could do a lot of the same. You remember all my Luke Musgrave, huh?
Uh-huh.
Yeah. Longtime listeners might too then. I think he could do a lot of the same stuff that Kraft can. Getting out into space in the flat and then outrunning people. I think he could do that. I think he's a better pure route runner than Kraft. So maybe that balances out some of Kraft's edge in just sheer explosive athleticism. So bottom line, I think if Kraft sits, I don't think the Packers are just going to scrap their tight end plans. I think they just shift that work over to Musgrave, and he's right above the tight end minimum at 2,700. And he really does make my lineup work going up against Devin's Cleveland Browns in a game that Green Bay ought to win handily and score a lot of points. If I've got to come off of Kraft, Juwan Johnson would probably be the next closest guy at 3,900. 21 targets through 2 weeks, at least 9 targets, and about 16 DraftKings points in both games. It requires a little bit of maneuvering because he's 1,200 more than Musgrave, so maybe you have to step down from a Garrett Wilson or a Devontae Adams to someone like Jacoby Myers. Maybe you scrape the very bottom of the barrel with like the Jets defense against a Tampa offense that's missing 3 starting offensive linemen. But I think you could make that happen and fit Johnson in. So, because I just don't think I could get all the way up to a Tyler Warren.
I'd rather just go Harold Fannin at that point. I mean, he was fine last week, 48 yards. The Browns only threw for 190. He was the second. He only had 2 yards less than Jerry Jeudy at 3,600. He's still a pretty good price. Zach Ertz is the other name that I'll mention. He played really well when Mariota did come in. So I think that he's a guy that could be interesting.
When you're building your lineups, are you trying to spend up to the cap and making sure that you're maximizing every dollar? Or if you find a lineup that you're comfortable with that leaves some money on the table, are you fine for action?
Well, good job, Phil. Let's play a game. What's Phil's dog's name? Put a note in the comments. And whoever gets it right will get we'll give them something. We'll give them a free year of Football Guys subscription and maybe some cash. I don't know if we're allowed to give away cash on YouTube, but we'll give away something if you guess Phil's dog's name correctly and you cannot be related or friends with Phil. What was the question, Jeff?
My question was, when you're building your lineups,
right.
Are you focused on maximizing the full budget or leaving money on the table?
In cash games, I think within like $300 to $400 typically is where I'm comfortable. If I get to 5, I start tweaking. Doesn't mean like I've left 500 on the table before, but that's often on weeks where there's like just a completely mispriced player. Normally 500, I can upgrade a defense or I can upgrade a tight end or like I can do something with $500, but 2, 3, 4, like it's completely fine.
Let's go into our GPP plays now, and we'll stay with you, Devin, here on your GPP quarterback plays.
It's gross, like really gross. Looking at just roster percentages as of Thursday night, I think the most popular guys are going to be Caleb Williams, Daniel Jones. I think you're going to see some. I think Dak Prescott will end up rising from where he is right now. But, I mean, that kind of puts like if those 3 guys, I don't know. I don't want to call them off the board because I think they're all fine. But the name that I'm looking at is at 2% rostered, and it's $6,100 Kyler Murray. Look, Kyler has not. I don't know. He's been disappointing over the last several seasons, but he has the upside of a two rushing touchdown game. That offense really hasn't gotten going, but it really hasn't needed to. I mean, they've had the easiest schedule in football over the first 2 weeks, and they've sort of just went vanilla against New Orleans and Carolina. He's rushed for 30 yards or more in each of his first 2 games. He's under a lot of fire for wearing a Michael Vick jersey, so maybe that's a sign that he's going to run more. I don't know. But at 2% rostered and the price is pretty good, I think that you could easily stack him with a Trey McBride or even a Marvin Harrison Jr. The other name that I will throw out there, Justin Herbert. No one really wants to play. We talked about Denver's defense, but if Daniel Jones is able to do it, like Herbert's been playing well enough that he could take that leap and really have a 300-yard game. So I think there's plenty of stacking options there, and they have enough targets in that offense to avoid Patrick Surtain. So I think it's an offense that's at least interesting. But I tend to just want to build lineups with Caleb Williams or Daniel Jones or Dak Prescott, but those would be the other 2 names that I would really be looking at.
What do you got, Phil?
It's kind of weird. I never thought that I would hear myself say, I don't want Brock Purdy to come back this week because I really want to play Mac Jones for $1,000 less, but that's kind of where I'm at. Devin's guy McCorkle looked really, really good last week, and I don't think it was just a function of facing the Saints. Just watching that game back, I mean, he looked poised, confident, commanded the offense. It was all there, and it shouldn't be a surprise that Kyle Shanahan had him prepared for that one. I don't know how much casual players are going to realize it, but I know that Devin probably came across it in his defensive matchups. The Cardinals are down like 5. Their best 5 cornerbacks are like 5 out of their best 6, right? They don't have Sean Murphy, Bunting, and Starling Thomas. Last week they lost 3 to injury. Garrett Williams to IR, Willie Johnson, and then Max Melton got banged up, but it looks like he's going to play hurt. And then surrounding him, all you've got left is like converted safeties, rookies, street free agents. Arizona's pass rush isn't all that great. They're kind of middle of the pack. And where Jones really thrived last week was because the 49ers kept them clean. So if they neutralize that Arizona pass rush, it's just going to be Jones like dropping it into buckets against these scrub cornerbacks who are playing either out of position or just like have no idea where they should be on the field. So I like the 49ers passing game a pretty good deal. The question then becomes, what do you do if Purdy plays? Do you still play him? And it becomes a little bit more difficult at that point. I think I will have some 49er stacks, but is he playing at 100%? Is it going to limit his effectiveness? Does he have the same upside? All those things enter into the equation and kind of make it a little bit less appealing. And then the other one that I have, and this is kind of pure game theory, is Jalen Hurts. It gives you direct leverage against the field's approach at quarterback this week, right? Because Hurts is the only one that's up in that range that you were used to paying for a Burrow, or going up a little bit further, you'd get Allen and Lamar. So let's say that the Bears-Cowboys game even slightly underwhelms. It's just like an average scoring game that hits the over/under but doesn't go over the total. And let's say Marcus Mariota plays like Marcus Mariota and Carson Wentz plays like Carson Wentz. All of a sudden, you've got the guy who's on a small percentage of rosters who has the ceiling to score enough raw fantasy points that negates the edge that those guys are giving you, even if they have good games, right? And then you're picking him up with his stacking partners who are discounted, who are also going to be low owned. Like, I don't remember the last time AJ Brown was 6,300. And then because you're paying up at quarterback, your entire roster construction is dissimilar from the rest of the field, right? You're building in a completely different direction with how you're allocating your cap. So for all of those reasons, I think Jalen Hurts looks pretty sharp. I mean, there's nothing about what I've seen from the offense outside of his normal tush-push stuff that makes me think that he's some wonderful play. But as I said earlier, there could be some points in that game. The Rams could push Philly's defense and kind of force Patullo's hand into getting Hurts more involved as a passer. And then he's got his usual rushing stuff, and that's how he gets to 35 points.
Lucy. That's the dog's name.
It is not, but I thought you were talking about like Jalen Hurts is Lucy with the football, and I'm Charlie
no.
Brown.
I've been stewing on what is his dog's name. It's not Lucy.
I'll give the folks out there a hint.
No, you will not.
Male dog. Okay. He's male, so it's not Lucy. And he's built like a tripod. He's all man.
Doesn't sound like it.
Built like a tripod. Oh man. Here we go. The last time that the Panthers and the Falcons played, the score is 44-38. Bryce Young accounted for 5 touchdowns. Michael Penix counted 312 yards and 2 touchdowns. You've got Bryce Young sitting here at 5,000, gives you something on the ground. You can go with Penix if you wanted to go that direction as well. Devin had already mentioned how much of a good play Bijan Robinson is. I think that if you're going to go with Bryce Young, Teterow McMillan is a natural matchup connection with him. You could go very cheap and explore maybe a Hunter Renfrow, maybe a Jatavian Sanders. I think there's some interesting plays there. I think Cam Ward at 4,900. I was watching Cam Ward's first 2 games last night, and he's doing very fun things on the field that I don't think a lot of players are capable of doing at this point. He started out with the Broncos, then with the Rams, 2 very difficult matchups, getting the Colts now. And if the Colts offense is for real, maybe this breaks open a little bit as an AFC South barn burner going back and forth. And then Devin led off the show talking about the Patriots and Steelers game. We saw the Steelers give up nearly 300 yards to Sam Darnold a week after. I think he was at about 150 in week 1. And so Drake May sitting here at 4,300. If that game breaks open a little bit, May can give you some rushing upside as well. And that might be a good entry point to build some differentiation at the bottom price of these quarterbacks here. Let's look at some running back plays. Phil, I'm going to go back to you again here with your running back plays for this week on GPP slates.
Sure. So I started prepping for the show before the news came out that Zach Charbonnet missed practice again. So Kenneth Walker, take it for what you will. He might end up as like turbo chalk if Charbonnet can't get back to practice tomorrow. But even if he does, I'm pretty sure he's going to be good chalk in tournaments because the ownership could skyrocket and he could still be a great play because he's that type of boom bust runner where if he continues to get all these carries, eventually he's going to break one. He showed last week that he can be every bit as great a fit as he profiled as in Clint Kubiak's outside zone scheme. He ran great, and the Saints are allowing the 6th highest rush yards over expected per play. If you do it in tournaments, just get ready for like George Halani to ruin your Sunday. But I really like Walker regardless. And then Jonathan Taylor at 7,200. Speaking of rush yards over expected per play, the Titans have allowed the most in the league through 2 games, and that's who Taylor plays this week. His workloads are just astounding. He looks like he did at the end of last season when he was going for like 25 to 30 DraftKings points every week. Last week, he was in there in a competitive game on 93% of the snaps, took every single rush attempt, all 25 of them, 23 of 27 pass routes. So I think he's got like another big game in him this week. And then we're going to be looking at him in the Christian McCaffrey price range and consistent 20% ownership from here on out. You're not sneaking him past anyone, but even if he's at 15%, I think he's like twice as likely to land in a first place lineup in this matchup. And then my only other one that I wrote down is a little bit of a hedge on what I said about Jalen Hurts. I think some of that stuff counts towards Saquon Barkley as well at 7,800. I just got a sixth sense about Philly's offense this week. I think it busts loose. If it doesn't happen via Hurts, it's going to happen via Barkley. And I don't think he clears 10% owned. It might even be, somewhere in that 5 to 8 range. And regardless of the slate, Barkley is always about twice that likely to break it. So again, just playing probabilities, I think low owned Saquon Barkley in the same range, especially as Bijan Robinson, where most people are going to go, looks like a good price pivot.
Saquon Barkley played the Rams twice last year. He had 460 rushing yards and 4 touchdowns in between those 2 games. So 460 is a pretty big number.
But that's a lot.
Yeah, that is a lot. Devin, what do you got here?
Yeah, I don't know. We've said a lot of the names that I think I'm not going to rehash a lot of them. So all of the names that I'm about to say are worse plays than every name that has already been said. Let's start there. Ramondre Stevenson, 5,300. Pittsburgh has allowed, like I was mentioning earlier, Pittsburgh has allowed over 100 yards in each of their first 2 games to opposing running backs. Trayvon Henderson is not ready to play. I know he's explosive. I know he's one of my favorite college players of all time. He's not ready to play. He has a 0.0 pass blocking grade from PFF. Like, I've never seen someone with a 0. But he's incapable. The game is moving too fast for him at the moment, it seems like. He was a fine pass blocker, if not a very good one in college. So it tells me that there's just like some adjustments that need to happen there. And if Pittsburgh's run defense isn't great, which they lost Alex Highsmith, Deshaun Elliott is still questionable. And if this trend continues where Breece Hall and Kenneth Walker had over 100 yards, there's a real scenario where Stevenson gets the bulk of the carries this week. The other name that I like, 5,000, Quinshon Judkins. I think that Jerome Ford is also incapable of playing running back, and Dylan Sampson, he's just a kind of a gadget guy. We saw 10 carries for 62 yards for Judkins, which going up against Baltimore, who only allowed 60 yards or more twice all of last season, to do that in your first game was pretty impressive. No one is really talking about him or playing him. I think people are still a little worried about the volume, and I think it's going to go up this week. I see 13 to 15 carries, probably catch 1 or 2 passes, and the Browns need something for the fans to get excited about at this point because there's not much in Cleveland. So if they can give their rookie a touchdown, I think that they're going to try and do that.
Yeah, the conversation all week long has been about rookies struggling. So wouldn't it just be right on the nose that we get, Quinshon Judkins getting into the end zone, Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt breaking out with the Commanders, Ashton Genty putting it together for his first big game.
Genty looks so bad.
Yeah, I know. There are 2 players, the 2 running backs in the NFL that are taking almost 100%, if 100% basically, of every opportunity out of their backfields. They're currently running back 25 and running back 29. Chase Brown and Tony Pollard they're both getting every single touch out of the backfields for the Bengals and the Titans. Already talked about with Cam Ward, the difficult matchups that the Titans have had to start the season with Jake Browning coming in. Maybe they see Chase Brown gets leaned on a little bit more. Maybe these guys put it together, because I have a hard time believing that these backs are going to get 100% of their touches and finish running back 25 and running back 29 on the year. But I think 2 plays that kind of just lingering out there. I like your other call outs as well, guys. You did a good job on that category. Let's go through wide receivers here. And Devin, wide receivers for GPP Plays.
What's going on in Tampa Bay? Mecca Buka looking like he's not going to play.
Buka gets a touchdown but doesn't get any other yards. But
is he going to play?
I don't know.
Practice on Thursday. So if he's not practicing, Baker seems to be okay. I know he was banged up at the end of the game last week, but like, I can't even talk anymore. If Igbuka doesn't play, I think Sterling Shepard at 3,600 is a interesting play. It's cheap enough that could be a salary relief type position. So that's the first name I would at least look at if you were going to be punting. And I know we'll talk about who your favorite discount play is at the end of the show, but I kind of just jumped the gun. Justin Jefferson, 7,500. Going back to that theory that people don't like playing backup quarterbacks, number one receivers, I tend to do just because I think that they end up getting more targets. Now the quality of the target may be worse, and we can debate that all day. But if they're still getting targeted, Jefferson hasn't had that breakout game yet because J.J. McCarthy's not good. So I think that it's a scenario where you could do worse than Justin Jefferson. Another name that I like this week, and it depends if Christian Gonzalez plays for New England, but DK Metcalf, if
return to practice. So
return to practice. So I like Metcalf a little bit worse than if he were to miss that game. And then the other one last name, just because he's been kind of bad this year, but Nico Collins, 7,300. Not a lot of people are going to play him because he's burned a lot of people the first 2 weeks of the season. And we see like he has upside more than just about any player at 7,300 or below. I think he can certainly have a 100-yard performance anytime he touches the field.
What are your plays, Phil?
So the field is going to be on Rome Odunze. I would say conservatively, maybe 20% ownership at 5,300. DJ Moore is $100 more on the same team in the same game with the same great matchup. Seems pretty apparent that Odunze has kind of seized the alpha role in that offense, but DJ Moore is the kind of guy that could get it done on one big play, and he's still been heavily involved. So I like the idea of using a little bit more in tournaments than Odunze. Ricky Pearsall at 5,500. So I mentioned how much I like Mac Jones. I mentioned the state of Arizona's defensive backfield. Juwan Jennings was missing from practice today for a second straight day. So this is another one of those scenarios where, depending on what happens in practice on Friday, we might see a spike in Pearsall's popularity. I'm definitely hoping that Jennings suits up so that Pearsall continues to fly under the radar. He could just as easily be the one who makes a big play or two the way that Jennings did last week for the 49ers. And then I guess this is becoming another injury contingent play because of what Devin was saying about Egbuka. Mike Evans at 6,600 kind of depends on what you think of Sauce Gardner as a cornerback. I know he wasn't great or as great as the name Sauce implies last year. So this year it kind of remains to be seen, but he's going to be covering Evans one way or the other, probably shadow coverage. The underlying metrics on Mike Evans have been great, even though the production hasn't been there. He's got a 27% target share, about 45% of the team's air yards, which is a massive share. And he's faced tough corners so far. A.J. Terrell in week 1, Derek Stingley in week 2. Again, he's got Gardner this week, but he's definitely going to be, I think, especially if Igbukah plays, underowned in relation to those numbers that are kind of under the hood. And I think that's about it for now.
Cool. Tight ends. Jeff is distracted because his Buffalo Bills are playing.
I'm here. I am present. No, I do want to mention a couple plays. Michael Pittman going at 4,900. Last week he drew Patrick Surtain, and they knew that coming into the game, so it was a quieter game for Pittman. Surtain did miss some time in that game, but I think that's a little bit maybe an under-the-radar play, given what we saw week 1. I think Devin had a good call out in cash games mentioning Devontae Adams at 6,200. I think that he's currently leading the Rams in targets. Deebo Samuel at 6,100 with Austin Eckler out of that lineup with Marcus Mariota potentially at quarterback. I think that you might see Deebo doing some Deebo type things, getting maybe flirting with double digit touches at 6,100. In that same game, 5,600, Jacoby Myers. We saw that Monday night getting maybe a little bit of Monday night pricing, but we saw Geno Smith repeatedly going to Jacoby Myers, and I think Jacoby Myers might be just about your cheapest shot at double digit targets on the slate. And then I've got a trio I'm going to save for discount plays, but I do want to mention Troy Franklin at 4,000. We saw the big game last week from Troy Franklin. I think that Chargers game could be a pretty difficult defensive game with Denver here, but Troy Franklin has been the clear wide receiver 2 within that lineup, if not the wide receiver 1, and he does a lot of things after the catch, maybe that Cortland Sutton doesn't necessarily do. So I think at 4,000 flat, that might be chasing from what we saw last week, given the matchup, but I think that's an interesting play. Tight ends. Devin, you're exactly right. Tight ends. Devin is very excited for his GPP tight ends, and let's lay it on here, Devin.
TJ Hawkinson, 3,800. He only has I think he only has 3 catches all year. But JJ McCarthy, 4 catches all year. There we go. Moving on up. 4 catches all year, but they've been keeping him in to block with McCarthy and trying to give McCarthy more time. I think that with Wentz, that we've seen Carson Wentz love his tight ends going way back to the Philly days with Zach Ertz and all of that. So I think that one of these pass catchers for Minnesota is going to have a good day. If I look at upside, I think that Hawkinson is certainly there at 3,800. He's had a 100-yard game. I mean, he had a 100-yard game last season. I don't know that any of the sub 4K guys has a 100-yard upside this week. I think you could pay up to who do you want to go to, though, is the problem. I'm going to go Trey McBride at 5,700 over Brock Bowers. I know McBride doesn't really catch touchdowns, and that's the problem with him. Doesn't have one this year. He only has 6 in his entire career on 233 passes, which is pretty sad. But if he does find Blind Squirrel finds a nut theory, which is every now and then, if there's a full moon somewhere, Trey McBride might catch a touchdown. And in those touchdown weeks, he's going to pay off his salary because his yardage and his volume is there almost every week.
Is it possible?
Yeah, I'm with you.
Moon somewhere at all times, or is the sun's going to block that out at some point? But
I failed astronomy, so I have no idea.
I'm with Devin on paying up, but I'm going to go with Brock Bowers just because I think it's going to add more leverage. I think this is a great week to play him because the Raiders are coming off of that embarrassing offensive showing in a nationally televised Monday night game. Everybody out there saw Bowers with a big old brace on his knee. He only went for 38 yards, but I think the thesis is kind of similar to what I was saying about Jalen Hurts. Very few people are going to be paying up at tight end. Those who do are going to be using McBride. And Bowers, he's still 100% capable of lapping the field in tight end scoring and being the guy that you need to have. And hopefully, being another week removed from that knee injury will help him out too. So that was my only GPP tight end note.
Jake Ferguson at 4,000 flat. We saw 12 targets last week for Ferguson in that Dallas Bears matchup that we do want to target. And then I was on it week 1 and I backed off week 2. Jatavian Sanders at 3,300. Jatavian Sanders had a big game last week in that comeback effort by the Panthers. Let's move into our stacks of the week. Phil, what is going to be your stack of the week?
So this is kind of a low percentage outcome, but I mentioned that I did like some scoring in Atlanta and Carolina. So what if that scoring does not come via Bijan Robinson? I know that is certainly the low percentage outcome part of this. But you'd get a very low owned stack. And what's happening on when I'm comparing roster percentages to optimal plays and running some early simulations here, I'm seeing these Atlanta wide receivers coming up pretty high, Drake London and Darnell Mooney. So that makes me wonder about a low owned and fairly cheap Michael Penix, right? So if you double stack those two and Atlanta's points come via the pass, and I mean, look, on any given Sunday, could Drake London catch a pair of touchdowns and could Darnell Mooney catch one long one? And these guys pay off at low ownership? I think so. And then you could run that back with Tet McMillan. AJ Terrell is out this week, so McMillan's matchup becomes a lot easier. I could totally see this being a similar scenario to last week where it's nothing but second half passing for Carolina because they've dug themselves into a hole. And McMillan would be the obvious beneficiary there. So just kind of maybe taking the same score that people are predicting for that game, but building it with the different building blocks and going via the passing game instead of the run game.
What do you got, Devin?
I am just going to go chalk, and I will go with Caleb Williams, Rome Odunze, and CeeDee Lamb.
You both kind of split me here because I was leaning on going on I think just the chalk that Devin mentioned, but going on the Cowboy side, just going with Dak, going with CeeDee Lamb, throwing. I think Jake Ferguson at 4,000 given this tight end slate, bringing Rome Odunze back. I think Rome Odunze has been targeted enough as the only receiver so much in Chicago. I did want to mention the stack that you were talking about, Phil, but on the opposite side, playing Bryce Young, playing McMillan, playing Jatavian Sanders, bringing it back with Bijan Robinson. I think that there's some fun potential in both of these games. Let's look at our discount plays of the week. Devin, I'm going to let you go first on this one on your discount play of the week.
So I've already mentioned a couple. I mentioned Sterling Shepard if Igbuka is out. I like Harold Fannin at the tight end position. But I'm going to go Quinton Judkins at 5,000. I think that he has a big game this week and could end up being the top rookie running back based on Omarion Hampton and Ashton Genty, who both look really bad so far, and Travion Henderson. You can't get on the field if you have a 0 pass blocking grade.
What do you have, Phil?
Luke Musgrave would be the easy call at 2,700 if Tucker Kraft scratches, but I already mentioned him. So I'll throw out Cedric Tillman at 4,500. Like with most weeks, this sets up as a week where Cleveland is going to have to pass like 45 to 50 times. And Tillman has 15 targets through 2 games, touchdowns in both games. I think he might just be flat out better at football than Jerry Jeudy. And 4,500, I think he makes a lot work, and certainly he's not going to be really on the field's radar much.
I said I have a trio of wide receivers that I think are interesting at 3,700. Dontavian Wicks, I think, is a little bit interesting, but the Browns have been a pretty strong defense to go against. Alec Eomanor looked fantastic last week, and I think that's a player at 3,700 that can break out a little bit this week. Hunter Renfrow, he was instrumental in the comeback attempt that fell short for the Panthers. They gave 8 targets to Xavier Leggett. He had 1 catch, lost 2 yards on that 1 catch. Maybe at some point, I think they're going to say, let's just go with Hunter Renfrow in the slot. Let's go with Teteroa McMillan doing his best Mike Evans impression. I think 3,700 in a game that we've already talked about could shoot out. Hunter Renfrow, my discount play of the week. That's all we got. Devin, why don't you give us some parting wisdom to all of our loyal audience here?
Phil's dog's name is Max.
Snuffle up, I guess.
Have a good one.
Should I show the people? Would it help to show what he looks like?
No
more.
We don't want someone to get it. We don't believe that someone can get it. So like and comment.
It won't be easy, folks. It won't be easy.